On this episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic, I will be recapping tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite and discuss a quick couple news items in the world of pro wrestling. That's all right here, right now. 360 Wrestling Fanatic. And hello, wrestling fans. Welcome to a brand new episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic. January 4th, 2022, or 2023, excuse me. The third podcast I've done today, and it is Wednesday night. And you know what that means. It's time to talk about the first episode of All Elite Wrestling Dynamite. New year, new AEW. But first, just a reminder, as I mentioned, this is the third podcast I've done. Started off the day with Good Morning Wrestling Fans, and then an episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic talking about Wrestle Kingdom 17, which was a great card, and definitely recommend you watching the replay if you missed it for some reason. My match of the night, once again, Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay. That match was just fantastic. Also, Okada and Jay White for the IWGP World Championship. Another great match. Really good main event. The debut of Mercedes Moné and KJ Muto's last match in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So that's Wrestle Kingdom 17 and JPW World. Speaking of New Japan, tomorrow early, again 4:30 a.m. Eastern Time, is New Year Dash, and this is going to be free, actually, on NJPW World. So, check it out. Even if you don't have a subscription to it, you can go there and watch it for free. And as I mentioned on 360 Wrestling Fanatic earlier, that this is like the Wrestle Kingdom, the season finale for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and New Year Dash sets up a lot of the feuds and angles that will continue on into the next year. So definitely check out Wrestle Kingdom. But now let's get to AEW Dynamite, featuring the new look, a new entrance. Dynamite is live tonight from Seattle, Washington at the Climate Pledge Arena. Commentators, as always, Tony Schiavone, Excalibur, and Taz. We start things off pretty big with one of the featured matches, Chris Jericho taking on Absolute Ricky Starks. And Starks looked really good in this match. Very impressive against the Ocho, Chris Jericho. And there's one point where Cool Hand Angelo Parker distracts the referee, and Daddy Magic Matt Menard hits Starks with Floyd the Bat, but Starks kicks out, and we get the Jericho Appreciation Society make their way to the ring and interfere, but then we see a save from Action Andretti, who took a fireball to the face from the Wizard, Chris Jericho, a couple weeks ago on Dynamite. But the numbers game is too much, and Jake Hager power bombs Action Andretti through a table. Next up on Dynamite, the AEW World Tag Team Championships are on the line. The Acclaimed taking on Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett. And before I get to the match, I just want to say, if you haven't heard the most recent episode of My World with Jeff Jarrett and Conrad Thompson, it gets pretty heated when they discuss the rap from the Acclaimed last week, so I won't spoil it too much, but if you haven't heard the newest episode yet, check that out. And on to the match. Starts off pretty good, and then it looks like we have new World Tag Team Champions. Anthony Bowens is pinned, but he gets his foot on the bottom rope, but Sanjay Dutt knocks it off, and the referee does not see this happen. Referee Paul Turner, I believe, or I could be wrong who it was, but the referee did not see it. So we have new AEW World Tag Team Champions, but then Aubrey Edwards to the rescue, where she comes out, tells the referee, this is not Paul Turner, by the way, I can't think of his name, I apologize, but tells him what happened. The match is restarted, and then we see the Acclaimed go on to retain the AEW World Tag Team titles. And to skip ahead a little bit, later on, we see Renee Paquette with Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt, and Sonam Singh in the back. And then we find out that this Friday night on Rampage, there will be a rematch for the AEW Tag Team Championships. But this time, it will be a no-holds-barred match. And now we see Seattle's own, the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, in the ring, and he calls out the AEW World Champion MJF. I apologize. First we had the match. Bryan Danielson taking on Tony Nese. And I have to admit, this match was better than I thought it would be. Actually, a very good match. Danielson getting the win after Tony Nese passes out. And then is the post-match. We see Bryan Danielson call out MJF. And we see the AEW World Champion Maxwell Jacob Friedman make his way to the stage, where he says he talked to Tony Khan, And he said if Bryan Danielson competes in a series of matches and wins every one until February 8th, he will get a world title shot March 5th at the AEW Revolution pay-per-view. Danielson first doesn't agree to it, but then he does, as long as he gets to choose the stipulation for the match at Revolution. And the stipulation he chooses is a 1-hour Iron Man match. So it is set. If Bryan Danielson wins every one of his matches up until February 8th, that we will see that 1-hour Iron Man match for the AEW World Championship, Bryan Danielson versus MJF. And I'm kind of surprised they made it an hour Iron Man match. Yes, that was the most famous Iron Man matches. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels was 60 minutes. And The Rock and Triple H had a 60-minute Iron Man match. But with that one and a lot of the other ones, Iron Man matches that we have seen have been 30 minutes. And I'm not saying that, don't get me wrong, Bryan Danielson and MJF, I believe they can pull it off for an hour. But that's the thing though, you have to have the right guys in it to make it entertaining where the fans are in it for the whole hour. But I'm sure Bryan Danielson and MJF can make it work, make it an entertaining match, and I'm pretty sure Danielson will win every match until then, and then we'll see the Iron Man match at Revolution for the world title. Next up, Swerve Strickland taking on AR Fox. Pretty good match here. There's some interference from Smart Mark Sterling. It gives them some kind of a foreign object, and Swerve gets the win over AR Fox. And Renee Paquette is backstage with Saraya, and she picks, Saraya and Toni Storm and Hikaru Shida, I should say, and Saraya picks Toni Storm as her partner to face Dr. Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter next week on Dynamite from Los Angeles. So it doesn't look like it's going to be Mercedes Moné as Saraya's partner, as it's been talked about. Some rumors online that it could be her coming to AEW, unless, because when earlier, I don't think I mentioned this during the recap, but we actually heard from earlier from Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, and the AEW Women's Champion, Jamie Hayter. They were interviewed by Tony Schiavone in the back, and I could be wrong. This might not mean anything, but Dr. Britt Baker did say something about that she was the boss. And at first, I kinda took that as a tease, maybe. Everybody knows who the boss is. Or now, or at one time anyway, now Mercedes Moné when she was on Wrestle Kingdom earlier this morning. She was announced as the CEO, but that still could have been a little bit of a tease. But like I said, that kind of a wrench got thrown into the plans, or that theory, when Saraya announced Toni Storm as her partner. There's just one thing I just thought of right now talking about it, and I'm not saying I think this is going to happen for sure, but one thing they could do is, I mentioned how Shida looked upset and a little bit bothered how Saraya picked Toni Storm for her partner. Maybe beginning of the night, Shida maybe could attack Toni Storm and leave her laying out injured so she cannot participate in the match. Then, when it is actually time for the match, it looks like Saraya is going to have to go into the match alone, 2-on-1, and then that's when we see the AEW debut of Mercedes Moné. But that doesn't really quite make much sense, because I think if Mercedes was debuting next week, I think they would have announced it ahead of time so they could advertise it, maybe would get more people to watch instead of making it a big last minute surprise. But who knows? Definitely have to tune in last week, but I would say most likely we will not be seeing Mercedes Moné on Dynamite next week, but hey, it's pro wrestling, never say never. Also, something else I forgot to mention, next week they didn't give a clear answer if Hangman Page is cleared or not, but it looks like he's going to be. So next week we'll see Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page on Dynamite. Now on to tonight's AEW Dynamite main event for the AEW TNT Championship. We got the hometown boy Darby Allin challenging the undisputed King of Television, the AEW TNT Champion, and the Ring of Honor Television Champion, Samoa Joe. This match was awesome. The crowd, of course, was hot for Darby. He was over big time. And we have a new TNT champion in Darby Allin. Once again becoming the TNT champion, the face of TNT. Really good main event. Like I always say, I definitely recommend this match. In case you missed Dynamite tonight, you gotta check this one out. So that was AEW Dynamite, and I just want to talk about the new set a little bit. It's got some screens. I mean, like, got of course the big screen, and then a couple of smaller ones on the stage part, and then two kind of like side screens, like on the side, and it's not bad. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure I'll probably get used to it, but I kind of miss the tunnels, and I like the separate heel and babyface tunnels. I kind of wish that they would have kept that, even if they changed it up a little bit, maybe kept the tunnels. I've always liked that, even back when TNA had the separate tunnels for the heels and the baby faces. But like I said, I'm sure this new entrance will eventually grow on me. But what can you do? So, great episode of Dynamite, like I said. And before we wrap up this podcast, get into a little bit of news. And unfortunately, some sad news, as it was announced on Dynamite. Tony Schiavone announced that Dustin Rhodes' mother passed away. So we, here at 360 Wrestling Fanatic, just want to send condolences to the natural Dustin Rhodes. Also, now William Regal is apparently now officially back with WWE after leaving AEW. The other day I seen where he announced that he is officially gone from AEW, and he denied the rumors. I know EC3 said that he was unhappy with management, and he said that he wasn't. He said he enjoyed his time with AEW and the Blackpool Combat Club. So it'll be interesting to see what his role is now that he's back in WWE. And also tomorrow, a reminder, it is an off Thursday, so I won't be walking to work in the morning, but I will do an episode of Good Morning Wrestling Fans. And tomorrow's episode is my pick for best matches of 2022. As I said, can't really pick just one, so I'm going to be discussing some of my favorite matches during the whole year. That's tomorrow morning. I'm not quite sure what time I'm going to record that episode just yet, but stay tuned. Also, remember, every morning, Good Morning Wrestling Fans, the newest 360 Wrestling podcast, and 360 Wrestling Fanatic is going to stay the same. Unfortunately, no set time or day of the week, just whenever I feel like it. And this Friday, got 4 hours of pro wrestling on Friday night with Friday Night SmackDown and AEW Rampage back to back with Battle of the Belts 5. That's this Friday night. So that's all for this episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic 345. Thank you very much for listening, wherever you are listening, to Spreaker or anywhere else. Remember, 360 Wrestling Podcasts at gmail.com is the email. If you have any questions or suggestions or just any kind of comments, you can suggest an episode of Fanatic Unleashed, a topic or a certain wrestler, a past show you want me to talk about, and I'll consider doing that episode. Until next time, keep watching pro wrestling. I am Lance, and I am a wrestling fanatic.